2018 saw the largest numbers of young Americans exercising their right to vote. In response, the nonpartisan organization Rock the Vote, whose goal is to energize young people, is expanding its reach.
They've launched Brands for Democracy, which aims to create a culture that empowers employees and customers to take civic action. And here to expand on that initiative and its significance is President and Executive Director of Rock the Vote, Carolyn DeWitt, friend of the show. Great to see you, Carolyn.
Great to be here.
Yeah.
All right, so tell us what you're up to.
So last week, a year out from the 2020 election, we launched an initiative building on our history of working with companies. And the initiative is Brands for Democracy. And what it is it brings together companies to really create a culture of civic engagement through voter registration, education, mobilization of their employees and or their customers.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the companies and what are they doing?
Yeah, so we launched with about a half a dozen companies and are growing. We have Gap, we have Hulu, HBO, Comedy Central, Paramount Network, TV Land, DoorDash, Yelp. I mean, some big names, right? And it really varies on the company themselves and sort of their structure and what they can do. But, you know, running everything from running voter registration drives both within the company and externally to their customers. Some companies are going to be running engagement opportunities and getting their employees involved. That's something that we've been seeing increasingly happen is young people, particularly young employees, want to be engaged and want their companies to step up and create those opportunities for them.
And what's some of the outreach they're doing on the customer side?
So there are various plans. It just kind of depends on the company, and we work with them in tandem to develop something that's authentic to the work that they do. So for some companies, that's engaging in marketing efforts and getting young people involved and using their voice. In some campaigns, they're going to be opening up those volunteer opportunities to their customers as well.
And so is this something that you've seen successfully work in the past? I mean, ultimately, I do think about it because I think we were talking about this earlier, which is about how hard it is or how hard it can be to register to vote. And it actually takes quite a bit of motivation on somebody's part. What are these companies doing? What have you seen in your past is the best way to get people to actually register to vote?
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up. I mean, one of the important things is a strong democracy needs a culture that promotes and celebrates democracy.
Right.
And brands and companies have a huge role to play with that, both for their employees and for their customers. The big piece that we're seeing is from 2016, so we've been working with companies since our founding, right, about 30 years ago. In 2016, companies that we worked with registered or were responsible for about 340,000 registrations. That's huge. That's about 20% of all across Rock the Vote's online platform.
Wow.
And have you seen an uptick in interest from companies sort of in the Trump era or in this political moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it is a reflection of, we've absolutely seen over the last few years, particularly after 2016, an increase in companies being required really by their employees and by their customers to step up. I mean, we have something like 9 out of 10 millennials are requiring or expecting companies to have a public stance about their values. We know that 75%, so 3 out of 4 young people would take a pay cut to work at a company that creates opportunities for them and has values that align with theirs.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, do you see that as a big split from previous generations? Is that what the data shows us?
Yeah, absolutely. Young people are working more and more. They're going to be next year 50% of the workforce. We are one of the companies with actually a generation that is going to be coming in and taking over the workforce and have a strong labor movement. But what they're requiring is very different than we've seen in past generations, particularly because they also don't ascribe to former generations that stayed at a company, for their entire career. We're seeing young people want and demand more from where they work.
I mean, I always think one of the most important things to keep in mind about American democracy is that the largest block of voters is non-voters.
Yeah.
Why do you think, I mean, you do this work, you try to engage young people in particular to motivate them to get registered, know what their rights are, know how to go about this whole process. Why do you think it is that so many people say, you know what, it's not worth it, or this isn't for me, or I don't like any of these people, and just make the choice to opt out?
I think a large part of it is them not knowing the power of their vote, quite frankly. I think we hear too often that it doesn't matter, my vote doesn't count. And with the lack of civic education we have in this country right now, we're not doing anything to correct that. Rock the Vote right now has started an initiative we relaunched last year called Democracy Class. We have 160 partners, and we push into schools and in community centers free curriculum on the history and importance of voting to make sure that young people in particular know the power of their vote.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the power of the vote thing. They're like, oh, I live in a state that is, 80% whatever. I'm just never going to have any impact. Just dispel some of those notions for maybe some of our viewers.
Yeah, I mean, one of the main pieces is that we only are voting for the president. We have elections up and down the ballot, so of course your vote, even in local elections, can matter more than it can in presidential elections. So, and that's where, arguably, in a lot of cases, that's actually where what impacts your day-to-day life.
Right. Yeah, one of the stories I always tell in Virginia, last cycle, control of the state house came down to a flip
it was like
of the coin.
Right.
So, I mean, not just for one seat, but for the entire control of the state house. So if you ever thought that your vote doesn't matter, just remember that story. Carolyn, great to see you. Thank you so
Carolyn.
much.
Thanks so much for having me.
A lot more rising after this.